Yes, that's right. I have brought 14 order dice, which doesn't seem like a lot, in a 750 point game, which then does seem like a lot, because that's nearly one order die for every 50 points. What have you got?
I have also 14 order dice in my Japanese list. I'm obviously a Japanese player, so I'm used to a bit more horde, so it was a bit easier for me to do this, but this particular game has a minimum of 12 order dice.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, we've got a special rule that we have a minimum of 12 order dice and a maximum 750 points. And this actually means that because everybody is now following this same rule, it's not a case where certain players are going to have loads and loads of order dice. Everyone's going to have loads of order dice. And when everyone has loads, no one has loads. It's balanced in a way. And I've really been looking forward to this for a while, this kind of rule set. I myself am bringing my Soviets. I have a whole bunch of little rifle squads. I did manage to squeeze in some interesting stuff by reducing some points in some places and having some higher points cost in other places. So I actually have an engineers platoon.
Sweet, okay.
Yeah, I've got 5 engineers with body armor. That's my most expensive unit. It's 101 points. I also have
flamethrower
that just have rifles and a flamethrower.
Nice. Yeah, so obviously I think we failed to mention is that this game has no tanks. It's a maximum of 7+.
Yes, so we're limited to armored carriers and soft skins, but no kind of medium or light tanks or anything like that, which most people weren't going for anyway because of the order dice minimum limit, just to make sure that no one just maxes out on having like 11 of the cheapest units and then a tiger.
Yeah. So I mean, I bought a light artillery.
Yes.
So that'll be pretty cool. I bought an anti-air gun as well, just because.
Oh, the autocannon.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Look, that's going to be useful in. Like, this is one of the things that a lot of people are not necessarily struggling with, but it's just a different way of thinking about making a list, because you're not necessarily thinking in the same way as for a normal list. Because now we're thinking, what can kill 5 riflemen? Because that's what the average unit's going to be. So an autocannon really going to be quite useful.
So yeah, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units of 5, 1 unit of 10 that are vets. Now I was batting the ideas back and forwards. So originally I didn't have the artillery, and then I did have. I think I had a unit of 7 at the end. Militia, 7 militia I think I had originally, but
That
yeah,
works.
no, I've switched that out.
Alright, so let's stop nattering, go inside and set up the tables, because we have to help set up because we're here early.
Sweet.
Alright, let's go.
Tea.
Alright, I wanted to quickly have a look through my list because I usually do that, but also this list is so much different from my normal tournament kind of visits, and so I kind of want to talk through it for that purpose as well, because with so many order dice and such a low points limit, we have kind of the opposite of when we play something like the tank war games where we have high points cost and low order dice. And you can see that pretty much everything here is a unit of 5 or smaller. So let's talk through my rifle platoon quickly. I have an officer with 2 assistants, and this is actually something that's very interesting in its own way, because if everyone's bringing 5 model rifle squads, or maybe 6 or 7 model rifle squads, 3 officers with submachine guns becomes really quite useful. I have a commissar. Again, that's a 3 model team. These have rifles just because I don't have any of my NKVD with submachine guns anymore. And then my infantry squads here, an NKVD squad. These are inexperienced, and they're the only inexperienced units, the commissar and the NKVD. I could have pushed more stuff to be inexperienced to get more points for the better stuff, kind of min-max the list out, but I felt 2 inexperienced squads, and I've got 2 veteran squads I'll mention later. I think that's a good balance. So these 2 squads here are 5 model rifle squads with 1 submachine gun each. I think I had points for another submachine gun, but I didn't end up taking it. I just used 1 each because I wanted to have a little bit of range, but also a little bit quite up close so that they are more versatile. And as we're limiting to the lighter vehicles, 5 Molotov cocktails is kind of the anti-tank grenades. They're going to be useful enough. They might fend off an armoured car or something if they get close, and for the sake of 10 points, it's worth it for one squad to have them, I feel. So that is my rifle platoon. I then have an engineer's platoon, and this is my most expensive units, and I have put them on a truck because engineers like to be very close. I have 5 with the body armor and submachine guns, and that is almost certainly my most expensive unit in the whole list. I then have a unit of 5. Now these have only one upgrade, so they don't have the body armor, they don't have submachine guns, they just have one flamethrower. And essentially this squad is just the flamethrower delivery squad. And I could have spent loads of points giving them the body armor as well, or putting the flamethrower in with the body armor squad, but I thought that, you know, these are going to be clogging up the enemy, slowing things down with the body armor, making them very hard to shift, but the flamethrower is going to go out and actually cause some damage. And because the truck has transport 12, we end up with 2 models for the officer, and they are all going in together. Finally up here is the heavy weapons platoon, 3 model officer again. We have light mortar, ampulamets, and the heavy machine gun, and I really like the heavy machine gun. I think that in 3rd edition with 6 shots now at +1 and a 48-inch range, I think this is really useful thing to have. We'll see how well it does for me today. Yeah, I think technically the ampulamets is in the rifle platoon, but I've put it here because it looks cool. This is probably my best kind of actual anti-armor weapon, so if someone does turn up with armored cars, it's the ampulamets job. The light mortar can have a go if it feels like it, but the light mortar is probably more going to be harassing kind of snipers and in-placed weapons teams for my opponents. So that is my list for today, and like I said, it's a very different way of building a list, but because everyone at the event is going to be having lists very similar to this, it is entirely fair. So let's look at game 1 and see who my opponent is.
And suspiciously, I was paired against none other than Paul himself and his Imperial Japanese force. Our mission, nice and simple for our first game, single objective in the middle of the board, just beside this winding road. Looking at the terrain, I can see there are 2 wooded areas right beside the objective that actually provide a good area of cover, like this shadow on each side, for anyone approaching from several angles. And I intend to take advantage of this. But I've moved some of my heavy weapons into this walled field on the left so that I can get lines of fire down the road at the very least. And my mass infantry is coming in on that shadow behind the trees on the right hand side. And this means they won't get shot at very much or at all until they're right on the objective directly. Paul laid out his troops fairly centrally but also evenly spaced out with infantry and support weapons all along, and so I really wasn't sure what his focus was going to be. He did get his officer riding on a motorcycle sidecar to the objective immediately, one of the first order dice of the game, and in return I immediately blew him up, replacing him with my engineers platoon. In fact, my engineers platoon pushed all of the way through, and the flamethrower got into the perfect position to miss and immediately run out of fuel. Yeah, nice, thanks for that. The forward unit here provided the perfect annoyance to distract almost all of Paul's units, although it wasn't long before that squad got taken out and the Japanese continued down the board. Especially as right behind them was the armoured unit, and this body armoured squad, their entire purpose in life is to be an impossible to remove thorn in my opponent's face. And this gave me plenty of time to get my infantry mass up through that tree line that I spotted earlier, but Paul managed to get just 1 unit onto the objective as well. I spent the entire last turn trying to shift these 5 models, even got heroic bravery clearing a bunch of pins, charging a single model into them, because if the dice favoured it, this would be the only way to remove them in one go. Of course, that didn't happen. As we'll see a few times, the high order dice being used today makes the game take longer, even though we're playing a low points limit game. It seems to be that the number of units is what takes time, and it doesn't matter as much how big each of those units are. But with both of us on the objective, that is a draw. My second game against some German Polizei had 3 objectives down the road in the middle. However, standing on them means nothing. Instead, you have to drag them onto your table half, and even better, off of your board, and it's their final position that scores you more points the further you move them. As this road is an extremely open area, I decided to swamp the middle, dropping my engineer platoon on the crossroads, and then everything else right up behind them. Which would have been a fantastic idea if things had gone to plan, because the first order die of this game was an anti-tank rifle shot blowing up my truck, leaving my engineers walking, but also, importantly for the first turn, down. I wasn't getting to any of the objectives quickly. I did sneak one squad up on the left, which I was essentially going to leave to my opponent, but I ran this unit out to touch the objective, and the plan was to panic my opponent into making some mistakes, rather than actually scoring this point. However, one model in this squad did survive, passed its leadership test, and brought the objective back. That wasn't supposed to happen, but I'll take it. My slow-moving infantry mass eventually reached the crossroads at about the same time that my opponent did, and the shooting match at very close range was pretty terrifying. My NKVD, that I can easily sacrifice because they're my cheapest unit, jumped onto the objective in open ground, but my opponent was having none of that, seeing what happened to the first objective, and the NKVD got shot down. Not long after, covered by the engineers, one of my rifle squads did manage to sneak up on the right objective and pull that behind this little wall, so I've got 2 now. All I have to do is distract my opponent so that they wouldn't be able to take them back. And so, my commissar scrambled over the bodies of the NKVD to stand on that middle objective, and in a beautiful case of last order die of one turn and first order die of the next, they managed to drag it onto my side of the board. The utter cheek. Fighting around the middle became even more brutal and even more lopsided against me as my opponent got the upper hand, but my opponent never had the chance to drag any of the objectives back, and with all 3 of them on my side of the board, that's a win for me. Although, as I mentioned earlier, with so many order dice, we actually lost a couple of turns, but I think even with 1 or even 2 more turns, my opponent wouldn't have been able to get to the objective and drag them all back in time. My final game was against Michael and on terrain provided by James in our group. These trenches are awesome, and we confirmed that because they are trenches and are supposed to represent cuts down into the ground, that if you're in one, you get heavy cover, but any shooting over one has no benefits of cover at all, leaving a lot of this board as open ground, which really makes for an interesting change of thinking when it comes to movement and lines of sight. So our mission was to stab the opponent's officer, specifically in close combat. I think the idea is we take them prisoner for questioning. My opponent deployed right in the middle, which was sensible, and my officer went on my left flank, and this meant that he would be in the heaviest of cover, but my opponent being in the middle means they have flexibility to move either way down the board. Now, adding to the chaos of this specific game is that our units are coming randomly from different board edges, left, centre or right. And my opponent got a lot of theirs coming from my left flank, right in front of where my officer was, and whilst I also got a few over here, my best units, the heavy weapons and the engineers, all came in from the far side of nowhere, the other side of the board, almost completely useless. I thought I might have a chance if I can drive the truck to the middle and charge the enemy officer with the engineer's platoon, but their armoured cars appeared, tied up my engineers almost completely, and they didn't really get very far. My defensive trench on the left was looking pretty tough, but I was outnumbered over on this side of the board, and even with the advantage of the trench, it wasn't long before my squads were being whittled down bit by bit. My officers stood firm right the way until the last second when trying to run away wasn't going to be enough, leaving my opponent the opportunity to charge and score the winning objective. Around the board there were some really silly things going on, such as my ED-SKaR failing several order tests after receiving a single pin and then foobarring and running out of the trench out into open ground. That's not sensible, don't do that. My Commissar and the NKVD bravely ran to the centre of the board, not realising that not only is this building not the objective of this mission, but it's also ranged in by every artillery gun on this side of Ypres. And whilst I did get my engineers within angry shouting distance of the enemy's officer, this is my armoured unit, so they move very slowly, it wasn't realistic to expect they'd actually be able to charge. So with all of my discussions of the game, let's hear what Paul has to say about the Rat and Greed concept and his games that he played.
Post-game Paul here. You can probably tell we forgot to record the post-game interviews like we normally do, so I'm filming this at home. We pulled each other for the first game, so that was quite interesting. We were playing a capture objective game. I quite like this game style purely because it just lends itself to my Japanese army in terms of hordes and hordes of men. It's quite fun, but still, it still lets some people have a few vehicles, transports and such like. So that was quite fun. As I say, me and Ed played. We ended up drawing purely because he had those Russians with the body armor that I could only kill on 6s. I spent so long attacking those. I threw 3 units at it, I think. It was crazy. But yeah, very amusing. I mean, at the start of the game, I ran my motorbike up. And I was like, I'm going to get the motorbike there, get it in turn 1. And then I can follow up with all my units. But yeah, it just turned into a real war of attrition. Yeah, really difficult. Second game I played against a new player. He was also Russian. So on that game, we were playing the one where we have to capture an objective from the middle of the table and then bring it off your own table edge. Now, the normal rules for that, there's one objective. You get to it with an infantry unit, and then as the rules stand, you can kind of daisy chain it back down your unit to get it off your table edge. Whereas this particular version of the game, we were playing with 3 objectives, and it kind of just acted as a sticky. It adds as an extra unit, a man to the unit, so we moved it along with the unit, and then the unit was limited to 6 inches of movement. So in that particular game, my motorbike went turn 1 straight in, got that objective on turn 1, but then obviously lost the speed advantage. So I ended up winning that game just on that one objective. The other one I ran my horse up onto, but unfortunately got taken out by an artillery, I think, pretty quickly. But yeah, that was quite good. And then the third game, we played another custom scenario where everyone's, if you took the company commander, that was the main one. If not, you pick one of your platoon commanders. And then the objective was to kill the enemy's company commander or lead platoon commander, but only in hand-to-hand combat. That was really difficult, purely because most people only had infantry, and the platoon commander can move as fast as an infantry, so trying to get up on them was difficult. I think Ed's game was the only one where they actually had a definitive winner, and I think that was more down to mishap than strategy. I did like the game type, but I think it would be suited more to something like Tank War, something where you've got something fast. I think that'd make it a bit more higher pace and a bit more fun. Overall, with the Rat and Krieg, as I said, I really enjoyed it. It really suited my my Japanese army and their sort of horde play style. I'd be keen to play it again in the future. I don't know, like maybe try a different army, but it was suited nicely to the Japanese.
Well, thank you, Paul, for sending me the after action report. I think a lot of the players at this event had similar experiences. Playing with such small units was a very different style of game, but it still worked. It was still fun, and it still provided a few different ways to play. I'm sure some people will come up with some super cheese for this minimum order dice type of game, but our group is generally fairly sensible, kind of generally speaking, and so all of the lists came out with some good choices, and overall the games were still balanced, as everyone had the same restrictions. I'm really happy that this Rat and Creek style of game works so well, and I really enjoyed my games today. I think I will make a specific video about order dice in the near future, so pay attention for that. But for now, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.